Hi, Donna. Welcome to Girl Take the Lead. We are so happy to have you with us and to talk about your amazing book. Welcome.
I'm so pleased to be here talking about my favorite topic with a kindred spirit because I know that you are one.
Thank you. So let's get started. If you'd introduce yourself to the listeners and tell them about this amazing book.
Well, my name is Donna Rubin, and I like to say I'm on my third act. I was a journalist for a long time. Then I was a speechwriter. I still write speeches sometimes, but a few years ago, I got on my third act. I got really, really interested, deeply interested in the voices of women past, the history of women's speech, or rather, you might say, the absence of the history of women's speech. I started researching it and digging deeper and deeper and deeper, and wrote a book,
Yeah.
an
Well,
anthology of American women's speeches. And I also created an online archive with thousands of speeches by women from around the world.
yeah, I recently accessed your archives because we did an episode on Dolores Huerta, and you have some speeches of her there, and I was so wonderful to read them and to hear her voice in a different way. So thank
I
you for all
admired
of that.
I admired Dolores Huerta. And when I published the book, I needed to get permissions to publish the more contemporary speeches, some of the more contemporary speeches. The one by her is from the 60s during the Delano grape strike, when they marched from up the Central Valley of California up to the capital of Sacramento. So I wrote to the head of the foundation, the Dolores Huerta Foundation, and I got an email back from this very nice gentleman who turns out is her son,
Yes.
Emilio. So,
Oh,
so
there's
yeah, of
great
course,
stories about Emilio. He used to run up and try and pass out leaflets and get chased by growers home. There's wonderful stories about Emilio.
I know
He's
that.
great.
No, I
Yeah.
didn't know that. But when the book, I know that's good to know. When the book came out, I sent a copy and he thanked me and said, he acknowledged it and thanked me.
Yeah.
He is a lawyer, I believe, and I think he serves as the lawyer for the foundation.
Yeah. We have been about voices and speaking, which is really what our podcast is trying to help women do so that they can be heard as leaders. And one of our episodes early on, episode 4, about Mary Beard's book, which was about women in power, we kind of brought forward the notion that it's been a long time that women have not been heard. And was it tough finding all of your speeches and getting hold of these treasures that I mean, it must have been a endeavor to find this all.
Well, yes. I mean, look, I've been doing it for several years now, so I know kind of where to look and I have an idea of how to find them. But it has been in many ways a frustrating experience because there's a lot of speeches that I know were given. I'm talking about hundreds, a lot. Of course, in history, there were that many, thousands, if not tens or hundreds of thousands of speeches by women. Women have been speaking throughout history, but we just didn't acknowledge, their words, their presence in public. But let me go back for a minute to talk about Mary Beard, who's one of my favorites. Her book was called Women in Power, a Manifesto.
Right.
And I esteem her. I mean, she's a scholar of ancient history, Roman history, and also also Greek history. I think she's mostly a Roman classicist. But in any case, she wrote this book, and her argument is that women from ancient times to the present have been silenced. Actually, the book came out of two different speeches that she gave in London. And I think for the London Review of Books, they're on my site too, in my archive, or links to them anyway. But her argument, I value it and I respect it, and I know that she's correct. However, her argument is that women have been silenced.
Mhm.
My project takes that in a little different direction or another step forward and says, yes, they were silenced. However, for every effort to tamp down a woman's voice, for every effort to silence a woman, women did speak back.
Mm.
There were women speaking. It's just we haven't acknowledged them. So I'm not a scholar. I'm not in her league. I'm certainly not in Mary, not even remotely in her league. She's an icon, but I do like to think that my project is in dialogue with hers because it's not quite accurate to say that women were silent. Women
Mhm.
were not silent.
I guess that makes me feel a little bit better that we've been talking for a long time. It just wasn't captured.
It wasn't captured. And as I say in the introduction to my book, I mean, just think about it like this. Suppose a woman steps up to speak anywhere. Maybe she gives a eulogy, maybe she gives testimony. And there were court testimonies going back, centuries, even in the Middle Ages, in the medieval time, women have been testifying and speaking. And if there was, so even if a women were speaking, if there was no one there to write down what she had to say, then her words have been lost to history. And just think about it. If we knew there was an event where a woman was going to speak and no one transcribed it and no journalist came, or if a journalist did show up, didn't write down what she said, then her words didn't make it in the newspaper, and then they weren't collected, they weren't anthologized, she wasn't quoted. So it's kind of a cycle.
Yeah.
It's kind of a cycle that begins with the question, did men in power care what women had to say? And I think it's obvious that the answer is no, they weren't interested in what women had to say.
Mhm. So, if is that what makes women nervous about speaking publicly? Do you think, or
That's an interesting question. I like that you made such an, framed it in such an open way, because I do think there's a number of things going on. First of all, let me just point out that I give a lot of workshops on public speaking. And so I'm very well aware of how many women still today are extremely anxious about speaking in public, don't like to speak, don't step up, and how absent women's voices are still today, even in the United States and much of the Western or developed world. Women still aren't represented in public like their male counterparts. So why is this? First of all, think about how women are criticized when they do. Yes, it's changing. Absolutely. It's changing. It's getting better, but slowly, slowly. Just think about Hillary Clinton and the criticism she faced for her voice and her look and her face and her tone. Is your voice too high? Is your voice too low? Are you screeching? Are you screaming? It's the scrutiny, not even to mention appearance. This has been going on for hundreds of years.
yeah.
So I have gone back into the newspaper records, and I have many examples of women who spoke during the Civil War years, and in the newspapers they talked about what she wore, the pearls at her neck, the kind of material of the dress that she wore. So that's number one, is that women have been treated as objects, objectified, not taken seriously, and criticized. But I think there's something else going on, which is that we don't have a lot of role models.
Mm.
So we all know the expression, you can't be what you can't see. That's been said by many people over time. And I do think it's true. If we don't have role models, people to inspire us and pave the way, then it's harder for us to step up and embody that role. And I do think there's something else going on, which is a kind of interesting dynamic, which is that if you don't speak in public, then you don't get the experience you need to do it well.
Mm.
And it can mushroom. And especially when women shoulder so much of the domestic responsibilities, as we know, women don't have the opportunity to speak in public. And the more you speak, the better you get.
Yeah. Practice.
It's as simple as that. The more you do it, the better you get, the more confident that you are. And then you like it because you get good feedback, and then you want to do it more. And men get that experience and women don't. So then throughout their careers, they hold back. So it's a whole bunch of things going on that
Yeah.
it's getting better, but it's not getting better overnight.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess we would say then it's public speaking is different for women than it is for men.
It's different experientially. I think, as you know, as we just talked about, women do face more scrutiny. They do face, are exposed to more criticism. It is harder for them in that way. But I think Overall, I think, especially in the United States, in Western Europe, in Australia, New Zealand, and places like that, women are getting recognized
Yeah.
using their voices, and they're
Yeah.
getting support for it. And there are a lot of programs, and there's been a lot of attention given to women's voice. So I'm very optimistic that things are getting better, and that younger generations will experience this
Hmm.
differently from the way we do. But your question was, is it different for women? So historically, I would observe that women were different from men because there were very gendered roles in society, and women spoke more about domestic concerns, about education, about temperance, because they were concerned with the health and well-being of the family. They
Hmm.
spoke, moving into like the Victorian era, they spoke about social reform, nursing, sanitation, domestic housekeeping. So historically, women haven't given as many war speeches, martial speeches, although there are some, but in general, women haven't been legislators, they haven't been military leaders, they haven't been constitutional experts. So there's a lot of gendered domains that
Hmm.
women weren't, that kept women in a certain role. But that's changing.
Yeah.
Goodness, it's changing.
And so you see in the younger generations then more courage or being more outspoken. It seems like they're a lot less tolerant of injustice.
Oh, absolutely. Look at what just happened in Spain. Just today, the what is he? The head of the men's soccer team. Is that what it was? He resigned.
Hmm.
Um, after a huge outcry against the forcible kiss that he planted on the face of that star player. And that's something else. That's a kind of sexual assault, but it's on the same trajectory or on the same spectrum of the way of addressing the way that women are perceived and treated in public.
Yes,
I
yes,
think
yes.
all over the world we are seeing progress, except in places like Afghanistan, where we're going backwards terribly. It's terrible the way women are treated in Afghanistan. We're going back to the Middle Ages.
So I imagine that when you're traveling around and you're hearing from people that have read the book and they come to you and they say, "Oh, I was so moved by this particular speech." Like they find something like a little treasure in your book. What do you hear from them? Like what are some of those treasures that people find?
Well, I would say that one of the things that I really worked hard to achieve with this volume is to demonstrate, to show that women, to show, I would say, the rich diversity of voices, of women's voices. So roughly half, a little less than half, maybe 45% of the speeches in the volume are by women of color. And I hear a lot people say, I had no idea so many Native American women were speaking, so many Black American women were speaking through the centuries, so many Asian American women and Latina, Hispanic. So I think it's natural, it's human nature for us to look for people who represent us, who look like us and share our backgrounds. And that's been moving to me. It's not a white woman's book, because the history of women's voices is not white. White
Yeah.
women and Black women and women of every background and ethnicity and race, they shared the platform, or they spoke out in their respective venues, and they spoke out for causes that were reflective of their own positions in society.
Mm.
Um, in the speech bank, it's interesting, their speeches are arranged in categories. And the very first one, because they're alphabetical, is anti-slavery. And if you look in anti-slavery in that category, you see so many speeches by Black women who were speaking out, of course, before the Civil War and before the Emancipation Proclamation, and so many white women, mostly Protestant white women, who were moved by their Christian faith to speak out against slavery. But it really is, it's heartening, it's moving to see that and to realize that those voices haven't really been assembled,
Right.
documented like that, and it's the same for every category. In every category, you click on it and you see, oh my goodness, so many different women from different backgrounds and experiences were speaking. And a lot of people have said to me that it's like this scale fell from their eyes when they see that. Because look, of course, I guess I always talk about this when I give my talks. I usually ask my audiences who were some of the famous speakers in American history, and they always rattle off, oh, Patrick Henry or Abe Lincoln or Frederick Douglass or JFK or MLK or RFK or Martin, all these men. Or even if it's an international audience, they'll talk about Mahatma Gandhi or they'll talk about Winston Churchill. They almost never mention a woman.
Mhm.
Almost never mention a woman. If they do, it's usually
Eleanor?
well, an Eleanor, maybe a Helen Keller, maybe Michelle Obama or
Mhm.
Hillary Clinton because they're recent, maybe Maggie Thatcher, but very few. I mean, predominantly people associate rhetoric and public speaking with men, and that's really what I want to change, and that's why I'm trying so hard to get this book into public libraries and even classrooms.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, is there anything we didn't cover that you would like to tell our listeners?
Well, I do have an ask. If people are moved by this project and see and feel that it makes that it adds awareness to their appreciation of history and they think it's valuable, please call your public library and ask them to buy the book or buy a copy for your daughters and your sons and nieces. But I don't mean to be like a hard sell, but I do think public libraries should have this book because they're hard to find resources.
Right.
I really dug through the archives, dug through the manuscripts, and I'm still uncovering more speeches all the time. So I would encourage people to join me in this campaign to change how we think about who spoke in history.
I love that ask. I think that's just so good. I I was telling you I was doing some research on Dolores Huerta and Helen Chavez, and I could find very few books. It was there was nothing in the library. There were books on Cesar Chavez, but none. I found one on Dolores, and I'm so spoiled. I think I'm so spoiled because I'm used to being able to pick up a book, do my research, and pull from it. And I went, there's nothing there.
They're not there. I actually didn't even know about Dolores Huerta until a few years ago when I was in Washington, D.C. and I saw an exhibit about her at the what's the it's called, I think it's the Portrait Gallery. It used to be the Patent Office. Anyway, it was a wonderful exhibit about her. And then I started reading about her and she spoke all the time.
She was the speaker
If you
for
go on YouTube, you can see at least one
yeah,
speech paper speaking,
yeah,
and she was so powerful and so passionate. And Dolores Huerta is still with us today, and
yeah,
she's still fighting the good fight.
yeah. Yeah, that particular speech, I think the one you're talking about on the Capitol steps, you also have in the archive. And she was telling Edmund Brown at the time, we're going to strike. Give us a law, or this is going to happen. Bad things are going to happen. And I just went, what a badass. Oh my God.
That just so your listeners know, what she was talking about was fair labor standards, decent wage and decent standards for the migrant workers in California, the laborers who were working out in the fields in very arduous conditions, very hard labor, and they were very poorly treated,
Yeah.
while the growers were very wealthy.
Yeah.
And so it was the laborers, the California laborers, against the owners of the
Vineyards. Uh-huh.
yeah, they were grape vineyards, and there were other crops involved too. But yes, it
Sure.
was the
Sure.
vine of grape.
Lettuce.
Yeah.
Lettuce was another one.
Badass. I'm going to stop calling her a badass. Thank you. from you. You're a badass. So thank you.
She's so good. Anyway, I think that covers our episode. Oh, before we go though, I will have in the show notes how they can get to your website and get to the archives. But do you want to tell them so that and where they can get your book?
Yes, absolutely. Speaking While Female. That's the cover of the book. Speaking While Female. We're about to come out with our second printing. The first printing is almost completely sold out. It's available on Amazon, but there aren't many copies left. Speaking While Female. And if you want to see the speech bank, the archive, it's at speakingwhileFemale.co. I don't own the .com. I've been working on getting the .com, but it hasn't happened yet. But speakingwhilefemale.co. And on the website, it talks about the book. And in the book, it talks about the website. So
Yeah. And everybody, that archive's just amazing. And please, I hope that you will check that out. It's really, really, you'll find your people, you'll find your heroines, and just smile for a while about their using their voices. And hopefully it'll inspire us to use ours, just like we are right now. Thank you, Donna, so much for being with us.
thank you. It's been a real pleasure. I'm glad that we are kindred spirits.
Absolutely. And I love the ask, everybody. Let's do that. Let's just get the book and donate it. I think it's going to
Or
help.
be careful, because sometimes libraries don't take donations. They
Yeah.
just won't take them. But if you call up the library and say, I'm a patron, I have a library card, and I'd like you to order this book, they'll do it. They
Yeah.
listen to the patrons.
Very much. Okay. Thanks everybody for being with us. Take care. Talk to you soon. Bye.